Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Saṅgham saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Friends, with the commencement of this meditation session, last Friday we discussed the first discourse of the Buddha, that is the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. Tonight we want to discuss the second discourse, which is Anatta Lakkhana Sutta, the characteristic of non-self. I see some of you were not here last time, therefore I guess it is necessary to summarize a little bit about the first discourse of the Buddha. You know, the Buddha, after his enlightenment, delivered his maiden discourse, the first discourse, on the full moon day of July, in which the Buddha gave the gist of whole teaching. First of all, the Buddha introduced the two extremes in the world, addressing the group of 5 monks. Buddha said, monks, there are two extremes which should not be followed by you. Then he pointed out the two extremes: sensual indulgence and self-mortification. It is because of sensual indulgence beings are born again and again in the sensual world. And it is because of self-mortification beings are born in Brahma world. So Buddha advised us to abandon both these. Then the Buddha introduced his way, the path, the middle way, which is the Noble Eightfold Path. It is called the middle way. Thereafter, in the discourse, the Buddha discussed about the central teachings of the Buddha. Central teaching is the Four Noble Truths. Buddha explained what the Four Noble Truths are. There he said, the unsatisfactoriness or discomfort is the first thing to be understood, to be comprehended. Then there is a cause. The cause was, as the Buddha said, the cause is craving, thirst, urge is the cause of unsatisfactoriness or discomfort. Then the third aspect, as the Buddha said, the cessation of unsatisfactoriness. Cessation of unsatisfactoriness is the cessation of craving, For this purpose, as the cessation, Buddha said, that is the enlightenment, that is the liberation. In order to achieve this, one has to practice the path, the method, that is the Noble Eightfold Path. In such a way, the Buddha introduced the Four Noble Truths in his very first discourse. At the end of the discourse, Venerable Kondanya understood this Dhamma. He realized the Dhamma. He got the vision of Dhamma, which is called Dhamma I. That means he attained the first stage of the holy path, which is called Sotapanna, or the stream enterer. He became a stream enterer. With this, the Buddha said, my mind is unshakable. My mind is unshakable. I have attained full enlightenment. And hereafter I will not be born again. In that way, the Buddha delivered his first discourse, and only one disciple, Venerable Kondanya, attained the state called stream enterer. The other four of the five, of the group of five, the other four could not understand this. That is why the Buddha had to deliver his second discourse, which is the characteristics of non-self. Tonight, we want to understand that discourse. So, this is the discourse. First of all, we have to understand the terms self and soul. These two terms are to be understood first. These two terms, self, in language-wise, we use the word self, like I myself should do this, you yourself should do this, like that. Self we use in language. But when you use the term self with S capital, that means soul. Soul and self. Today, these two terms, soul and self, both are interchangeably used in many religious and non-religious works without clear distinction. In all Abrahamic religions such as Judaism, Christianity, Islam and Baha'i, they maintain the concept of soul. In accordance with them, soul or self is a permanent entity. The God breathed into the man's nostrils right after the creation of man. So in brief, self or soul is a belief that there is a permanent entity with everlasting substance which was emanated from the Creator God, and eventually it is unified with the same God. So they all believed that there is a soul or self. In accordance with the teachings of the Buddha, there is no such thing. Internally or externally, there is no permanent entity, no substance to be called self or soul. Instead, Buddhism talks on non-self, which is in Pali anatta. Once Venerable Radha went to the Buddha and asked Bhante, what is emptiness? He asked, what is emptiness? To explain what is emptiness, the Buddha said, Radha, there is no self, no soul, or something belong to soul or self. What is emptiness means there is nothing permanent, no entity, nothing permanent in the world. That is the Buddha's explanation. On another occasion, Buddha got some soil, little bit soil on the nail of his thumb. Showing that, the Buddha said, monks, in the world there is no permanent thing, no substance, even of this much. Therefore, according to Buddhism, there is no such permanent thing, permanent entity in the world. Unfortunately, all worldlings, worldly people, they all grasp form as self, feeling as self, perception as self, volitional formations as self, and consciousness as self. That is what is called attachment. Attachment is the cause for the existence. It is because of that attachment we are born again and again in the world. So here in this discourse, the Buddha pointed out that there is no such entity, no such thing to be called permanent entity. So let's now understand this discourse. I am not going to read all this whole discourse, but I am going to summarize it. So as you have the discourse, you can read it later and understand. If you have any questions, you can discuss with me next day. So this second discourse of the Buddha, which is again from Samyutta Nikaya, the connected discourses of the Buddha. The characteristics of non-self. In Pali, Anatta Lakkhana Sutta. This also delivered at the place called Varanasi in the deer park at Isipatana, where the Buddha addressed the same group of five monks. Addressing the monks said, the Buddha said, Bhikkhus, form is not self. That is the Buddha's addressing. Buddha's first word. Bhikkhus. Bhikkhu means monks. Monks, form is not self, non-self. For bhikkhus, if the form were self, this form would not lead to affliction. That is the point. If the form is self, this form should not lead to affliction. And it would be possible to have it of the form, let my form be thus, let my form not be thus. You should be able to say that my form should be like this or that. If the form is permanent, that is the Buddha's point. But because the form is not self, form leads to affliction, and it is not possible to have it of the form. Let my form be thus, let my form not be thus. Like that. Referring to form. Then referring to feeling, Buddha said feeling is not non-self. Then perception, referring to perception, form, feelings, perception, volitional formation and consciousness. These five are called five aggregates. Buddha pointed out all these five aggregates are not self. Five aggregates are not self. So perception is not self, volitional formations are not self, consciousness is not self. That is the Buddha's explanation. What do you think, bhikkhus? Buddha then asked them, what do you think, bhikkhus? Is form permanent or impermanent? That is the Buddha's question. Whether the form is permanent or impermanent. The monk said, impermanent, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent suffering or happiness? That's the second question. The monk said, suffering, Venerable Sir. Is what is impermanent, suffering and subject to change fit to be regarded thus? This is mine, this I am, this is myself? No, Venerable Sir. That was the answer. Now, friends, it is necessary to understand these five aggregates, what you call five aggregates. Form, when you talk about form, there are two types of forms. This body, this is called body. It is not the form actually. Sometimes in the discourses you find the word form for this body. But the Buddha's teaching is based on the mind. Whole teaching is to be understood as mental development. The whole teaching is based on mind. Buddha did not want to explain all this physicality, but mentality. So, form, you can say this form is composed with four elements: earth, water, fire and air. That's true. We can accept that. But whenever the Buddha talked about the five aggregates, Buddha referred the form not physical but mental. Not only one form. Buddha pointed out there are 6 types of forms. 6 types of forms. What are the 6? Form of form. That means when you see the object, you take the picture, you take the image which is in your eye. That image is called what is called form in the form aggregate. That image, that form you feel, that image you feel and you perceive it. That image you feel, perceive, and then you start to think of it. And all these are well recorded with our consciousness. So in such a way, the 5 aggregates are to be understood in your sense base. Eye base, ear base, nose base, tongue base, body base and mind base. These are the 6 bases, 6 sense bases. So 5 aggregates are there in the 6 sense bases, where we can understand the form to our eyes, form of sound in the ear, form of smell in the nose, form of taste in the tongue, form of contact in the body, form of mind, like that. There are 6 types of forms, 6 types of feelings, 6 types of perception, 6 types of volitional formations, and 6 types of consciousness, 6 classes of consciousness. All these are called what you call 5 aggregates. Those 5 aggregates are to be understood clearly. Those 5 aggregates are what you call aggregates. 5 aggregates are not suffering. But if you cling to these 5 aggregates, Buddha said, clinging to 5 aggregates, affected by clinging to these 5 aggregates is suffering. In such a way, the Dhamma, the real Dhamma of the Buddha should be understood, and all these are mental. Now, the Buddha further said, referring to feelings, Buddha asked, is feeling permanent or impermanent? Impermanent. Then, for feeling, perception, volitional formation, and consciousness, all those are impermanent. Now the Buddha said, is what is impermanent, suffering and subject to change, fit to be regarded thus, this is mine, this I am, this is myself? The monk said, no, Venerable Sir. Therefore, bhikkhus, this is the Buddha's instruction. Therefore, bhikkhus, any kind of form, now there are different types of forms, any kind of form, whatever, whether they are past, future or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, all forms should be seen as it really is with correct wisdom. Forms, you see, forms, feelings, perception, volitional formation and consciousness, all these are to be seen with correct wisdom, with proper wisdom, with developed wisdom, not through eyes. Buddha did not talk about the forms seen through your eyes, but with wisdom. Form is to be understood with wisdom. Form, feeling should be understood with wisdom. Perception should be understood with wisdom. Volitional formations are to be understood with wisdom, and consciousness is to be understood, realized by wisdom. That is why wisdom is the most important thing. The Buddha said, my Dhamma, this Dhamma is for the wise ones. So we cannot take 5 aggregates as mine, me or myself, which is wrong. So any kinds of feeling, perception, volitional formation and consciousness, whatever the way, whether they are internal, external, gross, subtle, inferior, superior, far or near, all forms, feelings, perception, volitional formations and consciousness, all those are not to be grasped as mine, me and myself, but to understand with wisdom as this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. When you see things in such a way, in this manner, what would happen? Buddha said, seeing thus bhikkhus, the instructed noble disciples. Instructed noble disciples. Who is that? The one who knows the Dhamma, who has listened to the Dhamma, who has read the Dhamma, who has studied the Dhamma. Dhamma means what? Dhamma means the real words of the Buddha. Real words of the Buddha, not the later works. One who knows the Dhamma and who sees the Dhamma, who experiences revulsion. Revulsion is not the correct word there. The correct word should be disenchantment. Disenchantment. The instructed noble disciple experiences disenchantment. You don't cling to that. Disenchantment towards form, then towards feeling, towards perception, towards volitional formations, and towards consciousness. Then as the result, he becomes dispassionate. Dispassionate, not passion. Dispassionate. Through dispassion, his mind is liberated. You see, not the person is liberated. According to Buddhism, what is liberated? What is liberation? Liberation is mental. So, his mind is liberated, not the person. His mind is liberated. When it is liberated, when what is liberated? When mind is liberated, there comes the knowledge, it is liberated. It is liberated. Then he understands, as he is liberated, as his mind is liberated, he or she can understand clearly that destroy is birth, no more birth, no more birth to him or her. Destroyed is birth. The holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more for this state of being, no more to come. Friends, that is what the Blessed One said. Elated those bhikkhus, delighted in the Blessed One's statement. And while this discourse was being spoken, the minds of the bhikkhus of the group of 5 were liberated. They all became liberated ones. They all became enlightened ones, arahants, from the tents by non-clinging. So this is the end of the discourse. This is the second discourse of the Buddha. Let's all read these discourses of the Buddha again and again, which are called early discourses. As Buddhist or non-Buddhist, as cultured people, as civilized people, let's read this, let's understand these words of those enlightened ones, and understand this, and let's apply this Dhamma to our life so that we can live happily, peacefully, light-heartedly in this society. Let's all understand this Dhamma and let's practice this Dhamma so that we can live happily, peacefully. May we all attain supreme bliss of Nibbana. sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.